Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission here is always to take a stack of source material, the research, the history, the anecdotes, and distill it into the kind of knowledge that makes you truly well-informed.
And today we are undertaking a deep dive into a life defined by such stunning contrasts that its trajectory feels less like a biography and more like a myth.
We're talking about the journey of Dr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam.
Indeed. We're tracing the path of a figure whose origins were, the most humble imaginable. A boy who sold newspapers just to help his family eat.
Right, studying his textbooks under public streetlights in a tiny, tiny coastal town.
And who, through what seems like sheer force of will, intellect, and this profound dedication, he ascended to become known as India's missile man.
The principal architect of the nation's strategic defense, and then somehow its president. The distance between that Ramswarm street corner and the presidential palace in New Delhi is just staggering.
It really is. And our purpose today isn't just to recite a biography. It's more like we're performing an anatomy of his character. We're looking for the source code,
The source code of his resilience.
Exactly. How did these deep values and this determination allow him to overcome professional rejection, catastrophic public failure, overwhelming resource scarcity?
And turn all of that, all those setbacks, into national redirection and these enduring leadership principles.
Right.
And to set the highest possible watermark for his impact. Let's start with the moment the world sat up and truly, truly took notice. May 11th, 1998.
Okay, so the location is the Pokhran Desert in Rajasthan. You have to imagine a vast, silent, intensely monitored patch of arid land.
And India was operating under extreme international scrutiny, especially from nations with very advanced satellite surveillance. They thought they saw everything.
They did. And on this day, India conducted a series of 5 powerful nuclear tests. Pokhran II.
And the global reaction, particularly from intelligence agencies in Washington and London, it was one of absolute unadulterated shock.
Complete shock. If you consider the sophistication of intelligence gathering at the end of the 20th century, the high-res satellites, the seismic monitoring, human intelligence networks,
all of it.
The fact that this immense, complex operation was planned and executed entirely undetected is, it's almost unbelievable.
It really is. And what's truly fascinating here, based on our sources, is the operational genius, the secrecy. Dr. Kalam was at the very core of this.
He was. The sources detail that the entire process, the construction of these deep shafts, moving complex components, the engineering work, it was all done exclusively under the cover of night.
So they weren't just avoiding, spies on the ground. They were actively working against the clock to beat the orbiting American spy satellites.
They knew the schedules of the satellites, they knew exactly when they were overhead, and they planned around them. Everything had to be camouflaged, moved, and secured before dawn.
That's not just scientific capability. That is military-level discipline applied to a scientific mission.
It is. The success was a triumph of discretion and discipline. It proved that, resourcefulness could overcome this vast technological monitoring advantage held by global powers.
India's voice, which had been silent in the planning, finally roared across the globe in that desert.
A perfect way to put it.
And the man who orchestrated this, the architect of India's nuclear shield, Dr. Kalam, following this monumental, history-changing achievement, did he take a victory lap? Did he go on a global tour?
Not at all. And here is the first, just critical character note. He didn't celebrate, he didn't boast, didn't seek the limelight or some major ceremony.
What did he do?
Our sources confirm he simply moved on to the next mission immediately. That absolute lack of ego, following what many would consider the pinnacle of a defense career. It just begs the question.
Where does that kind of humility come from?
Exactly.
And if we connect this back to his origins as we have to, that ability to handle peak success without arrogance, it has to be deeply rooted in struggle.
I think so.
To understand the missile man, we have to start with the newspaper boy. Let's unpack the foundation of his character in our first segment.
Okay, so we travel back. October 15th, 1931, Rameswaram. A small coastal town in southern India, a place defined by the sea and its ancient temples.
And this was, the absolute opposite of a privileged upbringing.
Oh, completely. The family lacked any material wealth, any luxury. His father was a boat owner and an imam. His mother was known for her kindness, her deep spirituality.
So they were, as the source materials emphasize, rich in deep values and a strong heart.
But materially, the struggle was constant. Just putting food on the table was a daily challenge.
And this constant struggle meant that from a very tender age, young Kalam understood the crushing weight of economic necessity.
He had to contribute. He had to work. He became a newspaper boy.
Think about that image. A future president of a nation of 1 billion people walking the dusty streets, distributing papers before school even started.
And he wasn't doing it for pocket money, for candy. He was doing it to help keep the family afloat.
That must have ingrained in him such a deep understanding of labor, of the value of every single earned rupee.
It profoundly informed his worldview later in life. When he was managing these multi-billion-dollar defense and space budgets, he had this innate ability to conserve resources, to demand efficiency.
Because he knew.
Yeah.
Personally. He knew what scarcity meant.
He knew it in his bones.
And his education.
Yeah.
It mirrors that resource scarcity perfectly. He desperately wanted to learn, but basic amenities were, they were non-existent.
Our sources confirm he studied his dense textbooks not in a quiet room, not at a desk.
But outside, under the glow of public streetlights.
He lacked the fancy desk, the comfortable chair, the quiet, dedicated study space that, frankly, most of us take for granted. All he had was the faint glow of that street lamp.
And a level of pure determination that just transformed that lack of comfort into a focus of absolute strength.
It's incredible, and despite those hardships, his academic record was impeccable.
He topped every single class.
Every single one. That consistent success under that kind of duress, it just shows the mental fortitude he must have possessed. He was relying solely on his intellect and his will.
And that fortitude led him, in the early 1950s, to St. Joseph's College to study physics.
But physics was just a stepping stone. His true passion, the thing that really captivated his mind, was the dream of flight.
Of designing, building planes.
And as he put it, literally touching the clouds.
This dream provided the compass he needed. So 1955, he achieves this huge academic leap. He gets admission to the Madras Institute of Technology.
And we should clarify here, this is the Indian MIT.
Right, to study aeronautical engineering. This was the perfect intersection of his passion and a high-level technical field. This was it.
But this is where the dream almost instantly vaporized.
Why?
The cost. The admission and tuition fees were just astronomical. They were far beyond what his struggling family could even conceptualize.
So all those years of immense dedication, studying under streetlights, it was all about to be undone by a simple lack of money.
It seemed that way. And this brings us to a moment of profound sacrifice that I think more than any textbook or scientific achievement really defined Kalam's moral foundation.
This is about his sister.
His sister Zora. Quietly, without discussion, she took her gold bangles, sold them, and used the proceeds to pay the entire university fee. She saved his dream.
We have to pause here, because this detail is so critically important, especially in the cultural context.
Absolutely. Gold bangles or jewelry in many parts of India are not just an accessory. They're often a woman's only form of financial security.
Her pride, her emergency savings.
Sometimes the sole physical representation of her inheritance or her marital status, for her to give them up silently. It was a complete and total investment in her brother's intellectual potential. An extraordinary act of selfless love.
And for Kalam, this wasn't just a loan or financial aid.
No, it was a profound moral mandate. He realized his education was purchased at the cost of his sister's security, her sacrifice.
He carried that responsibility, that colossal debt of love, for the rest of his life.
And it fueled his relentless work ethic. He knew he wasn't just succeeding for himself, he was validating the ultimate sacrifice made by his family.
That sets such a powerful precedent. Now, armed with that profound mandate, Kalam enters the Madras Institute of Technology. But even with the fee paid, the path, it wasn't smooth. Let's pivot to segment 2 and explore 2 early professional setbacks that really forged his resolve.
Okay. The first test of his character occurred right there at MIT during his final year project. The culmination of his aeronautical studies.
And despite the high stakes, despite his sister's sacrifice,
the project failed.
And the sources are clear. This wasn't a minor correction needed. It was a fundamental technical failure.
And his supervising professor, S. Srinivasan, gave him this harsh, immediate ultimatum. Not a week, not a month.
3 days.
3 days to correct the error and make the project functional, or he would be forced to lose his college career. Everything.
Think about that pressure. A complex aeronautical engineering project involving detailed design and fabrication.
Okay.
And he has to salvage it in 72 non-stop hours.
It's an impossible deadline. It was designed to test not just his technical skill, but his mental endurance.
So how did he respond?
He channeled the pressure into pure, sustained effort. He worked without sleep for 3 entire days. No complaining, no asking for extensions. He just locked in until the problem was solved.
Then on the morning of the third day,
Exhausted but triumphant, he succeeded. The professor, who had intentionally pushed him to his absolute limit, just acknowledged his work.
this early anecdote introduced such a crucial lesson, that failure isn't a sign of inability.
Right. It's a necessary opportunity to push past your perceived limits. It demonstrated his monumental capacity for endurance under fire.
This capacity to build strength from failure became the defining characteristic of his career. But the really crushing blow came a little bit later, around 1958, after he finished his degree.
Yes. His dream, the passion that drove him into engineering in the first place, was to become a pilot in the Indian Air Force.
He applied, he went through the selection process, full of hope, visualizing himself in the cockpit.
And he was rejected.
Just rejected.
He was one of 9 candidates selected, but there were only 8 positions available. He missed the cutoff, not because of a lack of skill, but because of numerical bad luck.
That's devastating. This wasn't a technical failure he could fix.
Yeah.
This was a total, profound rejection of his lifelong dream.
The disappointment completely shattered him.
And the source material describes him retreating to Rishikesh, just seeking solitude, an answer to why his dedication had led to such a dead end.
He sat by the banks of the sacred Ganga River, defeated, confused, and just questioning his entire direction in life.
And here is the pivot, the moment that provided the spiritual fuel for his national service. A saint, Swami Sivananda, saw his pain.
And offered him 5 simple but utterly life-altering words.
Rejection is simply redirection.
That perspective is everything. It shifts the burden of failure from, I'm not good enough to, there's a different plan for me.
It allowed Kalam to stop viewing the rejection as this ultimate defeat and start seeing it as a signpost. The door to the cockpit was closed, but maybe
a door to a much grander stage was opening, building the wings for the entire nation.
that single phrase changed his entire psychological framework. It taught him the resilience to look for the open window instead of just mourning the closed door.
And that redirection led him directly into the service of his nation, starting his professional track in 1958.
He initially began at the DRDO, the Defense Research and Development Organization, working on military technologies.
Good work, certainly, but maybe a little removed from the rocketry and aeronautics he truly loved.
That changed in 1969. His talent for complex engineering and rocketry was recognized, and he was transferred to ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization.
And this was the moment his passion for flight truly found its national strategic purpose, building India's space program from the ground up.
And this transition immediately immerses us in segment 3, the era of extreme scarcity that defined India's early scientific ambitions.
When Kalam arrived at ISRO, this was not the slick, multi-billion-dollar organization we know today. Resources were incredibly limited.
We're talking about conditions that are almost mythological in retrospect. Our sources detail that there were no fancy labs, no specialized testing facilities.
No supercomputers for complex simulations. They were building a spacefaring nation with pure ingenuity and minimal material resources.
The illustrative details here are just critical to understanding the depth of their commitment. Think about the logistics. Delicate rocket components.
Which would today be transported by specialized climate-controlled trucks.
Right. They were carried by scientists on bicycles through the coastal roads of Kerala to the launch site.
On bicycles.
Yeah.
It's astounding. And the launch facility itself, they used local church buildings and coconut groves as temporary offices and workshops.
Because dedicated infrastructure just hadn't been built yet. They were literally launching a space program out of repurposed community buildings.
And yet, Kalam's internal fortitude, forged by studying under streetlights and his sister's sacrifice, it meant he never complained about these limitations.
He didn't allow scarcity to become an excuse for failure.
Never. He focused entirely on the goal, working relentlessly with what little they had.
This spirit was put to its definitive test in 1979 with the launch of the first satellite launch vehicle, the SLV-3. Kalam was the mission director.
He was, and he was carrying the weight of India's space aspirations on his shoulders. The national expectation was immense.
Success would mean India joining this elite club of satellite launching nations. But the launch,
It was a catastrophic failure.
the rocket failed seconds after liftoff, plunged violently, and disintegrated into the Bay of Bengal.
And this wasn't a hidden failure in a lab. It was a highly public, spectacular catastrophe broadcast across the nation. The media scrutiny, the political fallout, it must have been terrifying.
This moment, however, became the ultimate masterclass in leadership, delivered by the chairman of ISRO at the time, Dr. Satish Dhawan.
As the media descended, ready for finger-pointing, Dhawan performed a legendary act.
He stepped forward and faced the massive media contingent entirely alone. He did not allow Kalam or the young scientist to face that intense pressure.
And his words were immortalized. Dhawan stated, clearly and unequivocally, "We failed, but I trust my team. We will succeed next time."
He internalized the defeat. He used "we," protecting the scientists who had spent years working on this project.
The brilliance there is the psychological shielding. By taking the blame entirely upon himself, Dhawan protected Kalam and his team from the public shame and the political scapegoating.
It allowed them the critical psychological space and energy to immediately return to the lab, recover, and recalibrate without that burden of public scrutiny.
Kalam later cited this moment as the single most important leadership lesson of his life. The failure belonged to the leader, never the subordinate. It instilled this deep sense of loyalty.
And a belief in the power of moral responsibility at the top.
Yes. And 1 year later, in 1980, the moment came for the redemption attempt. The SLV-3 was ready again. The pressure now was even higher.
Of course, given the public failure and the resource investment.
But this time, everything worked flawlessly. The rocket soared, achieving perfect injection of the Rohini satellite into orbit. It was a massive, euphoric milestone for the entire nation.
Proving Indian scientific capability on the global stage.
Absolutely. And here is the second, equally important half of the leadership lesson. Dr. Dhawan, who had publicly taken all the blame a year earlier, he stepped back completely.
He asked Kalam, the mission director who he had shielded during the defeat, to face the international press and take full credit for this success.
This perfectly crystallized the principle Kalam would live by for the rest of his career in all his strategic roles.
Own the failures, share the success.
Exactly. When things go wrong, the leader steps forward and shields the team. When things go right, the leader steps back and elevates the team.
It's a profound model of servant leadership learned through the crucible of public catastrophe.
And that lesson informed everything that followed.
Which transitions us perfectly to segment 4, where Kalam applied this leadership model to the most sensitive national security projects, earning him that famous moniker, Missile Man of India.
Right. After the success of SLV-3, Kalam's focus shifted increasingly towards strategic defense. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, he spearheaded the Integrated Guided Missile Development Program, or IGMDP.
This was the era where India built its strategic defense shield, moving from basic rocketry to advanced weapon systems.
And this segment often gets summarized too quickly, but for a deep dive, we need to understand the strategic necessity. Why did India need this shield, and what specifically did Kalam deliver?
A good point. What was the geopolitical context?
Geopolitically, this was just non-negotiable for India's sovereignty. Kalam oversaw the development of a suite of indigenous systems designed for deterrence. We're talking about the 5 children of the IGMDP.
Agni, Prithvi, Trishul, Akash, and Nag.
Let's give some context on the 2 most famous ones. Prithvi, for instance, was the shorter-range tactical ballistic missile system.
Okay, so more for battlefield use.
Correct. But Agni, which means fire, that was the true game changer. Agni was designed as an intermediate-range ballistic missile, an IRBM, which is crucial for strategic deterrence.
So its successful development demonstrated India's ability to develop long-range missiles capable of carrying critical payloads.
Exactly. This wasn't just building rockets anymore. This was establishing national credibility and ensuring no regional power could threaten India without facing serious consequences.
It was a declaration of scientific and strategic self-reliance.
Yes. And the culmination of all this defense work, of course, was the Pokhran-2 tests in 1998, which we touched on earlier. Kalam's role here was pivotal.
He transformed the scientific capability into national action.
His decades of work on rocketry, metallurgy, complex systems, it made him the indispensable technical brain behind the operation. The sheer amount of planning required is staggering.
Let's revisit the secrecy, because it speaks volumes about the level of discipline Kalam enforced. The fact that the planning happened strictly at night wasn't just, a convenient choice.
No, they were tracking the passes of American military satellites. They knew exactly when they were overhead and ensured all visible work was halted and disguised during daylight hours.
Our sources even detail the use of complex camouflage techniques, making sure the desert terrain looks completely undisturbed to any overhead cameras.
Which is why, when success was finally achieved on May 11, 1998, it wasn't merely a scientific achievement. It was a perfect operational performance built on stealth and discipline.
And what was Kalam's reaction to this, the ultimate peak of his scientific and military career? A global shockwave, confirming India's strategic status.
Predictably, he remained completely humble. No ego, no bragging, no public self-congratulations.
He just moved on.
He internalized the massive achievement as simply a job done and immediately directed his focus to the next task. This humility after such massive success, it just validated the leadership lessons learned under Dewan. He was the architect, but he didn't seek the spotlight.
That consistent lack of ego paved the way for a beautiful shift in focus. We transition now to segment 5, where the scientist building missiles transformed into the public servant building mines.
Following Pokhran, Kalam was appointed principal scientific advisor to the government of India. This was the highest scientific advisory post in the nation.
And yet, our sources emphasize that despite the authority, despite the big office, his heart was never truly in those bureaucratic corridors.
He saw himself fundamentally as a teacher. He traveled relentlessly across the entire country, not to meet defense contractors or ministers, but to visit schools and universities.
He met with hundreds of thousands of students, speaking about his journey and instilling one singular message: dream big, and use that dream to fuel your hard work.
And this teaching philosophy led him to articulate his long-term vision in the book, India 2020. And this was not just a collection of technological forecasts.
What was it then?
It was a deep exploration of how India could transition into a developed nation within 2 decades.
What were the key elements of that vision? It wasn't just about building faster jets or more powerful missiles, was it?
Not at all. And that's the subtlety many people miss. India 2020 was holistic. He pushed for economic development, but crucially, he championed the PURA model,
PURA.
providing urban amenities in rural areas. It was a strategy to bridge the massive urban-rural gap by connecting rural clusters with good infrastructure, digital connectivity, and healthcare access.
So he was applying the same system-building logic he used for missiles, identifying component failures and designing reliable linkages to solve social and economic problems.
Precisely. He fundamentally believed that technological capability could be purchased or copied, but true national resilience required a moral, ethical, and intellectual foundation across the entire population.
And for him, investment in children's education and character development was the ultimate national security priority.
The ultimate priority.
And this profound national love and respect for his character and vision led to his ultimate non-political role. In 2002, he became India's 11th president.
The manner of his ascent is just extraordinary. He didn't achieve the office through the usual means of, partisan politics, coalition building, or internal controversy.
He was elevated purely through national consensus and respect. He was truly the people's president.
And his presidential style completely defied tradition. He minimized bureaucracy and maximized connection. Our sources state that he met with students and children far more often than he met with political ministers.
He used his platform for inspiration, constantly visiting schools and addressing assemblies.
And this personal connection was deeply maintained. Imagine the scale of the Indian bureaucracy, yet he took the time to personally answer letters from children.
That one act speaks volumes about his priorities. The aspiration of a young mind meant more to him than any official memorandum.
He became the ultimate champion of aspiration, distilling his philosophy into one defining quote.
Dream is not what you see in sleep. It is something that doesn't let you sleep.
And that quote is a manifesto for relentless motivation. It moves the concept of a dream from a passive fantasy to an active, driving purpose.
If your dream is truly great, it becomes an obsession. It demands your attention, forces you out of comfort, and sustains your effort until it is realized.
It's the definition of the single-minded focus he applied throughout his entire career, whether he was building a satellite in a church or orchestrating a nuclear test in a desert.
Following his presidential term, which ended in 2007, most former heads of state, they settle into a more reflective retirement. But Kalam, the eternal teacher, he just could not stop.
He immediately returned to the classroom. His post-presidency years were defined entirely by service, lecturing at universities, mentoring young scientists, writing more books, and answering the seemingly endless stream of student emails he received.
He fully embraced the role of India's teacher and mentor.
He did. And the final act of his life, which occurred on July 27th, 2015, is perhaps the most poignant summary of his entire existence.
He was giving a lecture at IM Shillong, one of the nation's top management institutes.
He was actively speaking to the students, talking about his lifelong passions, science, innovation, and purpose, right up until the last possible moment. In the middle of inspiring the next generation, he suddenly collapsed,
His very final breath was spent teaching.
fulfilling his dedication to inspiration and service until the absolute final curtain call. It's a profound, almost mythological conclusion to a life lived entirely for contribution.
It solidifies his legacy.
Yeah.
He died in the line of duty, not on a battlefield or in a tense political negotiation.
But in the highest service he valued, educating and uplifting the next generation. That just underscores an unwavering commitment that very few public figures ever achieve.
As we conclude this deep dive, let's reflect on the immense legacy he left, primarily by focusing on what he didn't accumulate, his non-material wealth.
Materially, he was an ascetic. He had no personal wealth to speak of, no fancy houses, no luxury cars. He remained unmarried his entire life.
He was singularly dedicated to his nation and his work.
His possessions, according to the records, consisted mainly of books and a heart full of dreams. He was the living proof that true success is measured by the magnitude of contribution, not the size of accumulation.
And he handled his own status and appearance with such characteristic humility, famously stating,
I am not a handsome guy, but I can give my hand to someone who needs help, because beauty is in the heart.
That philosophy just encapsulated his entire professional and public life, prioritizing selfless service and profound character over any form of superficiality.
And when he passed away, the national reaction was immediate and deeply emotional. The entire nation went into mourning.
Crying not just for a scientist or a former president, but for a teacher, a guide, and a father figure who had tirelessly invested his entire being into their collective future.
He was, and remains, a beacon of what a life built on pure determination, resilience, and ethical leadership can achieve. Dr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam, India's humble son, the people's president, the missile man.
And forever, the boy from Rameswaram who used a streetlight to ultimately guide an entire nation to the skies. What an extraordinary journey.
A testament to turning rejection into redirection and building a life of purpose out of pure sacrifice.
Absolutely. And based on his belief that the ultimate power of a nation lies in the potential and the dreams of its children, we have a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Since Kalam dedicated his post-presidency life entirely to teaching and mentorship, what systems, big or small, or what specific mentorship roles can you adopt today to actively invest in that future generation?
Whether it's sharing your specialized knowledge with someone younger, offering a few hours of mentorship, or simply providing a word of redirection when someone you know faces a setback.
Kalam's legacy challenges all of us to become the teacher, the guide, and the inspiration that he remained until his very last breath.
Something to explore and implement until our next deep dive.
Until then.
Stay curious.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive. If you joined us for part one, you know we really got into the big picture achievements.
We did. We covered the hardware, you could say. The rockets, the missile systems, the strategic science that, well, literally reshaped a nation's capabilities.
We looked at Dr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam, the missile man, the head of ISRO, DRDO, the scientist.
And the response we got to that was just extraordinary. But what really came through was this hunger to go, well, deeper.
Yes.
To get past the job titles, scientist, president, and to really understand the inner mechanics of the human being who held them.
Exactly. So that's our focus today. We're looking at the man who was defined not by his office, but by his character, his incredible humility, and the really powerful personal lessons that shaped him.
We're going to try and extract those essential knowledge nuggets. We're talking about his foundational influences, his mentors, his parents.
And his philosophical anchors, the things that kept him grounded, even when he was living in, and this is true, the largest residence of any head of state on Earth.
Our mission today is, I think, pretty simple. It's to give you a shortcut to understanding how discipline, a profound sense of humility, and this deep spiritual curiosity, not just technical brilliance, is what really defined the legacy of this eternal teacher.
It's a story of roots and reflection. So let's dive right into those foundational pillars, starting right at the beginning in the small, traditional town of Rameswaram.
To understand the president, you have to first understand the 9-year-old boy in that town. The context is just It's vital.
Ramaswaram back then, what was it like?
It was steeped in tradition. I mean, society was often very strictly segregated. Community lines, especially between, say, Hindu Brahmin families and Muslim families, they were very rarely crossed.
And it's in this environment, this really traditional setting, that we find the first, I'd say, revolutionary force in Kalam's life.
His high school teacher, Siva Subramania Iyer.
Right. This relationship seems to be the first time Kalam saw someone actively, defy that kind of entrenched prejudice.
That's a perfect way to put it. So, young Kalam, he had a very close friend, a Brahmin Hindu boy named Ramanatha Sastry.
Okay.
And they always insisted on sitting together right at the front of the classroom. Now, that might seem like a small thing to us today.
But back then, in that town, that was a statement.
Oh, it was a huge statement. It was a social and, frankly, a political act.
And then a new teacher arrives on the scene, and he's not happy with this.
Not at all. He sees this seating arrangement, and he is, well, the sources say he was deeply disturbed. He saw it as a violation of, the social order of religious purity.
So what did he do?
Immediately, he ordered Kalam to get up and move to the back of the class.
Wow.
Just like that, purely because he was Muslim. And you have to imagine, for a child, that's a moment of profound public humiliation. You're being defined not by who you are, but by your faith.
So how does Iyer, the original teacher, find out about this?
Word gets back to him, and his reaction is just fascinating. He is described as being incandescent with fury.
But he doesn't just, yell at the new teacher?
No. He's strategic. He understood this was much bigger than a classroom seating chart. He saw the education system itself actively teaching division.
So he takes it to a higher level.
He confronts the parents.
Yeah.
Both Kalam's and Sastry's. And he makes this powerful case that education must be a force for unity, for liberation, not for entrenching old divisions. He basically told them, while you as adults might be bound by tradition, these children deserve a chance to be different.
And it worked. The seating arrangement was restored.
It was. But Iyer knew that just, changing a rule wasn't enough. The prejudice was deeper. It was in the community. It was, even as it turns out, in his own home.
Which brings us to this incredible story, the dinner test.
The dinner test, yes. So Iyer invites young Kalam to his house for dinner. And again, you have to understand the gravity of this act.
This wasn't just a nice thing to do.
Not at all. This was an action that could have gotten Iyer and his family completely ostracized by their community. A high-caste Brahmin teacher inviting a Muslim student to eat a meal in their kitchen. It was social dynamite.
And the conflict happens right away, inside his own house.
Immediately. Iyer's wife, who is described as being, a very good person, but deeply bound by her traditional beliefs, she refused, outright. She would not serve food to a Muslim boy in her ritually pure kitchen.
This is such a powerful moment. Even the radical teacher's home isn't free from tradition.
And this, right here, is where Iyer teaches the lesson that shaped Kalam's entire life, his approach to conflict.
What did he do?
He didn't get angry. He didn't argue with her or try to force her. He simply picked up the food himself, served Kalam with his own hands, sat down beside him, and ate with him.
Wow.
He showed through his own silent action that the rules of humanity were more important than the rules of tradition.
But the real insight here, I think, is the persistence. It wasn't a one-time thing.
Exactly. He knew that one meal wouldn't undo generations of conditioning. So he invited Kalam back again.
And again.
And again. The sources suggest this went on for weeks, maybe even months. It was this campaign of persistent, loving defiance against a rigid custom. He was just gently, repeatedly exposing his wife to the reality that this boy was just a good, respectful human being.
And eventually the wall crumbled.
It did. Eventually, his wife's heart changed. She started serving Kalam herself, and not just grudgingly, but happily.
So what's the big takeaway for Kalam from all this?
It's that you don't always need a shouting match to create change. That patient, persistent, respectful engagement, when you lead by an undeniable personal example, can be so much more powerful. Iyer basically gave him a lifelong blueprint for dealing with division.
That is an incredible inheritance from a mentor. So let's shift from his teacher to his home life. Let's talk about his father, Jainal-Abdin.
The second crucial pillar.
The simple boat owner, right? No formal schooling.
None at all. But he's consistently described as possessing this immense foundational wisdom. This is where Kalam gets his framework for discipline and spirituality.
And it all starts with the daily routine.
The routine is everything. He would wake up every single day at 4 a.m.
4 in the morning.
Without fail. First, prayer at the mosque, then reading the Quran. And only after that spiritual grounding, would he begin his workday.
So this wasn't just about being religious, it was about a sequence.
It was about absolute discipline, prioritizing reflection before action. That structure, that habit of waking before the sun, it instilled a respect for routine that you can see directly in Kalam's later life. It's how he became that dedication machine we talked about, the man who could run a space program on 4 or 5 hours of sleep.
And it wasn't just work ethic. His father also taught him the value of stillness.
Yes,
Yeah.
the practice of reflection.
Yeah.
Zainul Abidin had this habit of walking to a small, quiet coconut grove every day.
And what would he do there?
Just, in silence, to think.
In a world that's all about noise and action, that's a radical idea.
It is. And it became Kalam's blueprint for managing intense pressure. He learned that sometimes the answer to a really complex problem isn't in the data, it's in stepping away from it, letting your mind settle and allowing intuition to surface.
And it's in this atmosphere that his father gives him this piece of advice that really becomes the anchor for his whole life.
The most famous piece of advice, absolutely. He told him, when you pray, don't ask God for things. Ask for strength. Ask for wisdom. The rest will follow.
Let's break that down. It's such a profound shift in thinking.
It's the entire difference between focusing on acquisition, on the result, and focusing on capacity, on the process.
So don't ask for the promotion, ask for the skills to earn it.
Precisely. Kalam never chased titles. He never chased positions. He focused on building the strength and the wisdom needed to solve the hardest problems, whether they were in engineering or in society, and of course the positions of power found him anyway.
And just like Iyer, his father was also a model of unity.
A powerful one. Zainul Abidin had a deep philosophical friendship with the Hindu head priest of the main Rameswaram temple.
They weren't just acquaintances.
Not at all. They would share meals. They would have these long, deep discussions about theology and philosophy. So young Kalam grew up witnessing this seamless interfaith brotherhood. It wasn't a theory. It was his daily reality.
So the lesson from Iyer in the classroom was being reinforced every day at home.
Exactly. It was this double exposure to unity. He learned from both his teacher and his father that wisdom and goodness, they aren't confined to one temple or one mosque. They transcend those boundaries.
Which brings us to the third foundational pillar, his mother, Ashiyama.
The quiet anchor. The source material portrays her as this deeply spiritual, gentle, and utterly selfless heart of the family.
Her contribution was about compassion.
Boundless compassion and self-sacrifice. She had this rule. She insisted on feeding any hungry person who came to their door.
Even though the family themselves didn't have much.
That's the key. They were not wealthy. They often struggled with scarcity themselves. But their door was always open.
And that compassion extended to her own children in a really tangible way.
We have this story that when food was scarce and there was only enough for a few people, she would quietly give her own portion to the children.
And she would claim she'd already eaten.
Exactly. She would go hungry so that they wouldn't have to. Kalam saw this every day. He witnessed this level of selfless devotion.
When you're raised on that, how could you ever become obsessed with material wealth?
You can't. It makes his later simplicity as president completely understandable. It wasn't an act he put on. It was just ingrained in him.
And like his father, she also broadened his cultural horizons.
She did. She told him stories not just from the Quran, but also from the great Indian epics, like the Ramayana. She made sure his moral education wasn't siloed into one single tradition.
So you have these three pillars: the teacher who challenges division, the father who teaches discipline, and the mother who models selflessness.
The tripod of character. Unity, discipline, and humility. And you have to keep that tripod in mind as we now watch this man transition to the absolute highest echelons of power.
Okay, so let's make that jump. We take this man, forged by, poverty, wisdom, and this deep sense of humility in a small coastal town. And in 2002, you put him in Rashtrapati Bhavan, the president's residence.
And the contrast is it's jarring. Rashtrapati Bhavan is not just a big house. It's a symbol of immense power. It has 340 rooms.
340.
It is the largest residence of any head of state anywhere in the world. It's this palatial monument to colonial power and then to modern Indian stature.
So Dr. Kalam walks into this opulent palace. What does he bring with him?
Well, the staff, who are used to managing, huge estates, massive wardrobes, collections of art, they were completely unprepared for him.
What did he arrive with?
He arrived with his books, his veena, the musical instrument we have to talk more about, and a few simple changes of clothes.
That's it.
That was it. No expensive furniture, no art collection, no status symbols of any kind.
I just want to pause on that. A 340-room palace, and the new resident basically just needs a small library and a musical instrument. How did the staff even react to that?
It was a complete shock to their system. They were trained to manage excess, and suddenly they were faced with this profound minimalism. The sources say they were just bewildered.
He only used a tiny part of the residence, I assume.
A tiny fraction. They recounted that his needs were so minimal that they often struggled to find things to do for him. They realized his power wasn't coming from the symbols of office around him. It was coming entirely from his mind and his mission.
And this minimalism extended right away to his finances, which showed this incredible integrity.
Absolutely. Kalam saw his salary, which was paid by the Indian taxpayer, as public money. So he donated almost all of it.
All of his presidential salary.
The vast majority of it. He gave it to a charitable trust he had founded called PURA. He kept only what was absolutely necessary for his own basic personal expenses.
PURA. That stands for Providing Urban Amenities in Rural Areas.
Yes. And that choice is so important. It connects directly back to Ramaswamy.
Of course.
He grew up seeing that huge disparity between the cities and the villages. PURA was his way of honoring his roots. It was focused on connectivity, physical, electronic, knowledge, and economic connectivity to try and bridge that urban-rural divide.
So he's using the highest office in the land not to enrich himself, but to systematically help people who came from the same background as him.
Exactly. And the most powerful proof of this integrity comes at the very end of his term. After 5 years in that palace.
What happened when he left?
He left with the exact same few items he arrived with. The books, the vina, and the clothes.
He accumulated nothing?
Nothing. No gifts, no acquisitions, no new wealth that came from his position. It's the ultimate definition of non-attachment in a position of power. She was a caretaker of the office, not an owner of the palace.
Let's shift from his possessions to his interactions, specifically with the people who mattered most to him. The youth. He earned that title, the children's president, for a reason.
He had an almost sacred commitment to communicating with young minds. He would receive thousands of personal letters every single week.
Thousands a week.
Imagine the volume. Bags and bags of mail, mostly from children, writing about their dreams, their problems, their fears.
And the staggering thing is, he insisted on reading them himself.
He did. He insisted on reading and replying to as many as he possibly could, personally. He refused to delegate what he saw as a core responsibility.
For a head of state with a diary packed with, diplomatic crises and policy meetings, it's unprecedented.
He understood the incredible impact a personal reply from the president could have on a young mind.
Yeah.
He had this famous quote, "Every letter from a child is a window into India's future."
He saw it as intelligence gathering, not fan mail.
Exactly. He treated it as critical national intelligence. And this wasn't just about sending back inspirational words. It led to real, life-changing interventions.
Right, there's the story of the young girl who wanted to be a scientist.
A beautiful example. She wrote to him, explained her dream, but said her family just didn't have the money for her to go to university.
Now, most politicians would send back a generic, follow your dreams letter.
But Kalam took personal responsibility.
Yeah.
He didn't just write back. He personally connected her with scholarship programs. He used his network to find her funding. And this is the most important part. He followed up.
He tracked her progress?
He did. And the result? She became a successful engineer. One letter, one presidential intervention, and her entire life trajectory was changed. He didn't just inspire, he invested.
And this dedication to young people, it would sometimes clash pretty spectacularly with official protocol.
Oh, constantly. The story of the motorcade is the classic example.
Set the scene for us.
Okay, so he's on his way to a formal, very important government function. The presidential motorcade is moving according to a very strict security and time protocol. You don't stop. You don't deviate.
But on the way, they pass a school.
They do. And there are children outside, waving flags, cheering as the convoy goes by.
And Kalam sees them.
He sees them, and he immediately orders the motorcade to stop.
You can just imagine the panic in the security detail.
Total panic. But he stops the procession, gets out of the car, and walks into the school to spend time with the children, talking to them, answering their questions, encouraging them.
So he arrives very late to this important function. What was his excuse?
His justification was pure Kalam. He just said, the future of India was calling me. I had to answer.
He prioritized the real human connection over the man-made schedule.
He saw his job as serving the people, not the protocol. And when he spoke to those students, his whole approach was different.
He wasn't interested in their grades?
Never. He never asked about their test scores or their rank in class. He always asked one simple question. What is your dream?
Why that question?
Because he fundamentally believed that dreams measure potential, whereas marks, for the most part, just measure memory. He wanted to unlock their ambition, not just assess their past performance.
And this principle of simplicity, it extended to this universal respect he had for everyone, no matter their job or status.
He completely rejected the idea of social hierarchy. You see it even in these high-stakes international meetings.
Like when he met a European head of state.
Yes. The first thing Kalam would do is take the time to greet the drivers, the security staff, the assistants. He'd speak to them warmly before he even engaged with the foreign leader.
Which must have been so disorienting for people used to the normal power dynamics.
It was. The other leader was reportedly just stunned. But to Kalam, he wasn't greeting service staff. He was just greeting people.
There was also this story at the international dinner.
Right. A huge grand dinner. And a young server waiting on their table is visibly nervous. And Kalam, who's in the middle of this high-level political discussion, he just pauses everything.
And turns to the server.
He turns to the young man, asks him his name, and asks him about his dreams. In that moment, in a room full of powerful people who probably didn't even see him, Kalam affirmed his dignity.
His power never inflated his ego.
Never. He remained that humble boy from Ramaswaram. He showed that true leadership is about acknowledging the humanity in every single person you meet.
Okay, let's pivot now to his professional philosophy. We've talked about the character, but that character had to be applied in some of the most stressful, high-stakes environments imaginable.
We're talking ISRO and DRDO, developing India's strategic rocket and missile capabilities. This wasn't a quiet academic lab.
And this required a level of commitment from him that is just, it's legendary.
It really is. We're talking about the dedication machine. A man who for decades regularly slept only 4 to 5 hours a night. His workday started before 6 a.m. and often went past midnight, sometimes to 1 in the morning.
That's a brutal schedule. Was it even sustainable for the people working for him? Did it create a toxic work culture?
That's the crucial question. And the answer is no, because he never asked anyone to do something he wasn't already doing more of. He led by example.
He was the first one in, last one out.
Every single time. The staff knew if there was light on late at night, it was Dr. Kalam's office. His leadership was earned through moral authority, not just his title.
And there's that great anecdote that captures this. During a critical project deadline?
Yes. The team was working on a really complex rocket launch. They were completely exhausted. They'd been working around the clock, and they were ready to give up and miss the deadline.
They wanted to go home.
They did. And Kalam, who was just as tired as they were, he stayed. He didn't order them to stay. He just said, very quietly, "The rocket doesn't know we're tired. Let's finish."
The rocket doesn't know we're tired. That just cuts right through all the excuses.
It connects their feelings to the objective reality of the mission. It's an appeal to their shared purpose. And out of pure respect for his commitment, the entire team stayed. They pushed through and they met the deadline. That's real inspirational leadership.
So with that kind of intense workload, how did he handle the stress? How did a person decompress from the pressure of, building nuclear-capable missiles?
The answer is so fascinating. It wasn't a vacation. It was the harmony of science and art. And this brings us back to the Veena.
The musical instrument he carried with him everywhere, even to the presidential palace. For listeners who don't know, what is a Veena?
The Veena is one of the oldest and most complex string instruments in the world. It's central to South Indian Carnatic classical music. It requires incredible technical skill, precision, and also this deep spiritual focus.
It's seen as the instrument of Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge and art.
Exactly. It's the perfect fusion of artistic expression and mathematical precision.
So after a day spent managing the precision of rocket science, he would turn to the precision of complex musical scales for hours on end.
That's right. It was his form of active meditation. He said that music connected him to a level of thinking that pure engineering logic just couldn't access.
And this wasn't just a hobby. It directly helped his work. There's that specific story from his ISRO days.
Yes, where a technical breakthrough actually came to him while he was playing. The team was completely stuck on a problem, deadlocked. They'd run all the simulations, they'd hit a wall.
So Kalam tells them to take a break.
He does. And that night, instead of looking at more blueprints, he just played his Veena alone.
And the solution just appeared to him?
He said it just. It clicked into place while his hands were on the strings. The precise physical solution they needed for this rocket component, it just manifested in his mind. The next morning, he walked in, presented the solution, and broke the deadlock.
So he saw a direct relationship between the patterns in music, the ratios, the harmony, and the physical laws he was working with.
He absolutely did. He saw music, poetry, and science as just different languages for describing the same universe. It's why he would always mix quotes from literature into his technical speeches. He believed you needed both the analytical and the creative mind to be truly effective.
Okay, so let's get to the final piece of his professional philosophy, and this might be the most valuable one for anyone listening. His view on failure.
This was probably the biggest cultural change he brought to these big bureaucratic organizations. He didn't just tolerate failure, he actively encouraged it.
Which is the opposite of how most organizations work.
Completely. He had this belief that if you aren't failing, you aren't trying hard enough, you're just playing it safe, repeating things you already know how to do.
Right.
And that is the death of innovation.
So how did he create an environment where people weren't terrified to fail?
He changed the question. In a typical post-mortem after a failed test, the first question is always, who is responsible for this?
Which leads to fear and blame and covering things up.
Right. Kalam's standard question was, excellent, now we know one more thing that doesn't work. What did we learn?
That one small shift in language is so powerful, it moves from liability to knowledge.
It reframed a setback as an investment. And when your scientists and engineers realize their job isn't to be perfect, but to be bold, they stop playing it safe. And that's how ISRO and DRDO made such rapid progress with such limited resources. They could afford to fail fast, learn, and iterate.
He even came up with his own acronyms to drive this home.
He did. He reframed the words themselves. FAIL, he said, just means first attempt in learning.
So he weaponized the language against pessimism?
He did. And END just means effort never dies. He took the finality out of a setback. He taught his teams that the journey of innovation is just a long process of resilient learning. It's why he's still studied as a model for radical organizational change.
So as we move into the final chapter of his life, even after he leaves the presidency, he's still living by these principles from Ramaswaram: simplicity, teaching, and serving.
He is. And he now has this heavy security detail, which is standard for a former head of state. But the sources all say he hated it. He found it excessive and, most importantly, distancing.
It put a wall between him and the people he wanted to reach.
Exactly. He saw that security cordon as being completely against his life's purpose, and he was constantly pushing back against it.
The village school incident is the perfect example of this.
It is. He's visiting a remote village, and his security team has done the standard thing. They've set up metal barriers and ropes to keep the crowds, especially the children, at a safe distance.
Which is just security 101.
From their perspective, yes. But Kalam saw a wall separating him from the very reason he came. And he told them to take the barriers down immediately.
What did he say?
His words were, I came to meet the children, not to be protected from them.
And he just walked right into the crowd?
He did, freely. He chose, again, connection and inspiration over his own personal safety. He was demonstrating that real authority comes from being approachable, not from being walled off.
And he remained active, traveling, teaching, right up to the very end.
Right up to his last breath. And that final chapter is it's the most profound reflection of his entire philosophy.
This is July 2015. He's 83 years old.
And he's not retired. He travels to IM Shillong, a top management school, to deliver a lecture. He literally died doing the thing he loved most.
And the topic of that final lecture is so poignant.
Incredibly so. It brings everything together. His science, his spirituality, his vision for the future. He was lecturing on creating a livable planet Earth.
So his last conscious moments on Earth were spent talking about how to save it.
Yes. He began his lecture, full of energy as always.
Yeah.
But about 5 minutes in, he paused. He put his hand on his chest, and he collapsed from a massive cardiac arrest. He was pronounced dead later that evening.
There's such a perfect, almost poetic symmetry to that.
There is. His last breath was spent in the act of teaching, of inspiring, of trying to articulate a vision for a better world. He passed away while completely embodying his purpose.
And the reaction from the nation was just this massive outpouring of grief.
The country just stopped. It wasn't just a state funeral. It was this public expression of love for a man that everyone felt belonged to them.
He was buried back in Ramaswaram.
Back where it all began, with full state honors. And the streets were lined with thousands and thousands of people, not just politicians, but ordinary citizens, students, the scientists he'd mentored.
This wasn't mourning a politician. This was mourning a teacher, a moral compass.
And the deepest tribute, I think, came from the children. Schools all across India held these spontaneous special assemblies. Kids who only knew him from his books felt like they had lost a personal mentor. He had transcended all the usual boundaries because he never claimed to belong to any one group. He dedicated his life to everyone.
So when we step back and we look at the whole picture, how do we define his legacy?
Well, you can list the tangible things, and they're huge. The Agni and Prithvi missile systems, building the foundation of the Indian space program, the nuclear capability, these are concrete nation-changing achievements.
But the real legacy, the deeper one, it's intangible.
It is. It's in the millions of minds he ignited. The students who chose science because of him, the teachers who changed their methods to focus on dreams instead of marks, the leaders who saw his example and learned in humility.
His books, Wings of Fire, ignited minds, they're still bestsellers.
Because they're not just autobiographies. They are philosophical manifestos.
The real measure of his impact wasn't about the rockets he built. It was about the dreams he sparked.
Exactly. The ultimate tribute is when a young person today says they want to be good, like Kalam, humble, dedicated, kind, not just powerful or famous. He taught the world that character, applied with relentless consistency, is the most powerful technology we have.
We've covered such profound ground today. From a classroom in Rameswaram to the pressure of the space program, all the way to the presidential palace.
And the lessons that come out of his life, they're really universal blueprints. Your background isn't your destiny. Failure is just the first attempt in learning. Humility is the greatest strength in a leader. And it's purpose, not possessions. That truly elevates a life.
Dr. Kalam's life is just this perfect example of knowledge being applied in its highest form. The science he learned wasn't just to calculate a trajectory, it was to elevate people, to foster service, and to build unity.
And his dedication to teaching was just absolute, right up to the very last second of his life.
And that final, profound moment brings us to our last provocative thought for you, our listener. Kalam literally died teaching the concept of creating a livable planet Earth. So if you knew your last moments were approaching, would you be content with the lesson you were leaving the world? With the legacy you were embodying in that one final defining act?
It's a powerful challenge to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life of the eternal teacher, Dr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam.
Until next time, we'll leave you with his most famous call to action for every dreamer listening. Dream is not what you see in sleep. It is something that doesn't let you sleep.